Isolde María Duarte's world unraveled in the moment her heart betrayed her. It had been a routine Tuesday, unremarkable except for the thunderstorm that drenched St. Benedict's Medical Center in darkness. She was in the prime of her life, until a sudden collapse in her university library left her sprawled among books and startled whispers. By the time paramedics arrived, her pulse was faint, her skin pale. The doctors later called it idiopathic cardiac arrest, a sophisticated way of saying we don't know why her heart stopped. Her parents, devout Catholics from a long line of Eucharistic ministers, clutched their rosaries tighter with each passing minute in the emergency room. Despite the hospital staff's relentless efforts, Isolde's time of death was declared p.m. For minutes, the body of Isolde María lay still, yet somewhere beyond the veil, she was moving. When she gasped for air at minute, her body jerked like a marionette cut from its strings. The doctor reeled backward, dropping the defibrillator paddles. A nurse screamed, and her mother collapsed to her knees, crossing herself frantically. Isolde's eyes snapped open, burning with a strange light. Her lips parted, trembling, as words tumbled out, not her own, yet spoken with conviction. "I have seen the light. I was with him. Jesus sent me back with a warning." Her voice carried an unnatural authority, and for the first time her father, usually skeptical of grand spiritual claims, believed. Isolde's mother stumbled forward, gripping her daughter's hand. "Corita, what warning? What did he say?" Isolde's head tilted, her gaze piercing through her mother, as if seeing far beyond her. "The world has forgotten him, and because of that, darkness rises. We must prepare for what's to come." The rain drummed against the hospital windows like an unrelenting prayer, a plea for mercy, whispered through the storm. Inside the sterile walls of St. Benedict's Medical Center, time had stopped for the Duarte family. Isolde María lay pale and lifeless on the hospital bed, her long dark hair matted against her cheek. Just hours before, she had been at her university's library, poring over books on theology and philosophy. A sudden collapse had sent her spiraling into unconsciousness. By the time the paramedics arrived, her pulse had dwindled to almost nothing. Now, her parents stood vigil. Her mother, Sophia, clutched a rosary so tightly that the beads left imprints on her fingers. Her father, Raphael, paced back and forth, his face a canvas of grief and disbelief. At 3:33 p.m., the flatline blared. Sophia's knees gave way as she fell to the floor, wailing. Raphael froze, his lips moving in silent prayer. A nurse pulled a white sheet over Isolde's still form. For 47 minutes, the world moved on without her. And then, the impossible happened. At p.m., Isolde's chest rose with a violent gasp. Her body convulsed, her arms jerking upward as if invisible hands were pulling her back from the abyss. The nurse screamed, dropping the clipboard in her hand. Raphael rushed to his daughter's side, shouting for the doctors. Isolde's eyes snapped open, their brown irises now flecked with an otherworldly gold. Her lips trembled as if she was struggling to form words. When she spoke, her voice was low but steady, carrying an unshakable authority. "I was in his presence," she whispered. "Jesus sent me back with a message." The room fell into stunned silence. Sophia crawled to the bedside, tears streaming down her face. "Mi hija, ¿qué dices? What message? What did he say?" Isolde's gaze seemed distant, as if she were still seeing a place no one else could. He said, "Darkness is coming. The world has turned away from him, and I have been sent to bring them back. We must prepare." Before anyone could respond, Isolde's body collapsed against the bed. Her breathing steadied, and the golden glow in her eyes dimmed. She was alive, but the words she had spoken lingered in the air like a thunderclap. Isolde woke to a world that no longer seemed to make sense. The harsh beeping of medical equipment, the sterile smell of antiseptic, and the muted murmur of voices all felt distant, like echoes from a forgotten dream. Yet, her mind was crystal clear, sharper than it had ever been before. She sat up in the hospital bed, her heart racing with the realization of what had happened. Her mother, still in a state of shock, sat in a chair beside the bed, her eyes bloodshot from the tears she had shed. Raphael, pacing in the corner, kept glancing over at Isolde, as if expecting her to disappear again. "Isolde," Sophia whispered, voice trembling with disbelief. "Is it really you?" Isolde nodded slowly, the weight of her words pressing against her chest like a stone. "It's me, Mama, but something is different. I've been with him." She didn't need to say more. Sophia crossed herself, muttering a prayer under her breath. Raphael, ever the skeptic, frowned deeply. "With who, Isolde? You're still recovering. Maybe you had some kind of hallucination." "No, Papa," Isolde interrupted, her voice firm. "It wasn't a hallucination. I saw him. I spoke to him. Jesus sent me back, and he gave me a message. Raphael's frown deepened, his fingers tapping nervously on the back of the chair. A message? What kind of message? Isolde looked at him with an intensity he had never seen before. Her eyes were no longer just those of a year-old student. They seemed to see beyond the confines of the room, beyond the world. There was a sense of urgency in her voice as she spoke again. He said the world is heading toward darkness. People have forgotten him, their hearts are cold. And it's because of this. Something terrible is coming. We must prepare. A chill ran down Sophia's spine and Raphael shifted uncomfortably. How can we prepare? What does that even mean? I don't know yet, Isolde admitted, her voice softer now, as if the weight of her newfound knowledge was too much to bear. But he said I would know when the time comes, that I have a purpose now. There was a long silence. Sophia placed a hand on Isolde's forehead, checking for a fever, but there was none. Only warmth, an unnatural warmth that radiated from her skin, as if she were glowing from within. Suddenly there was a soft knock on the door, and a tall man in a black clerical collar stepped inside. Father Dominic, the parish priest, had been one of the first to arrive at the hospital after hearing about Isolde's revival. His eyes were tired but kind, and he approached with a mixture of reverence and caution. Isolde, he said gently, his voice low. I've heard of your experience. She met his gaze, feeling an overwhelming sense of recognition, though she had never seen him before. It was as though he had been waiting for her, too. You believe me? Isolde asked, searching his face. Father Dominic smiled faintly, though there was a trace of worry in his eyes. I believe in miracles, Isolde, but I also believe that sometimes miracles come with a great responsibility. Isolde's heart beat faster. I need to understand what this responsibility is. I have to warn people. I need to tell them what I saw. Father Dominic hesitated before answering. There are some who would call your message blasphemous. There are others who might see you as a threat. Be careful, Isolde. Not everyone will listen. She nodded slowly, but deep down, she knew that the message wasn't hers to deny. It was a weight she had been chosen to carry. The days following her revival passed in a haze. Isolde's parents kept her home, afraid to let her out of their sight. But word of her miraculous return spread quickly through the small community. Some came to visit, curious and hopeful, others skeptical and dismissive. The town became a battlefield for differing opinions. One evening, Father Dominic invited Isolde to the church. The quiet of the sanctuary felt soothing, but also filled with a certain foreboding. You must be careful, Father Dominic warned again as they sat together in front of the altar. There are powerful forces at work here. Some will seek to use your experience for their own gain, and some may try to silence you. Isolde glanced at him, her face resolute. I won't be silenced. I can't be. What I saw, what I felt, it was too real, too important. Father Dominic sighed, rubbing his temple. I understand, but the road ahead will not be easy. You will face doubt, fear, and even hatred. Not all will accept you as a messenger. I know, Isolde replied, her voice steady, but I have to try. The world needs to hear this message. As Isolde walked out of the church that evening, her mind swirled with the enormity of her task. She had no idea how she would spread the message that had been entrusted to her, but one thing was certain, she could not face it alone. The morning after Isolde's visit to the church, she found herself sitting on the edge of her bed, staring out the window at the rain-soaked streets. Her mind raced. Every moment felt like a flash of clarity and confusion at once. She could hear her mother in the kitchen, softly praying as she prepared breakfast, the scent of fresh bread filling the house. But even in the comfort of her own home, Isolde felt the weight of the world pressing down on her. Her phone buzzed, pulling her from her thoughts. It was a message from Father Dominic. There's a man I want you to meet. He can help you understand what's happening. Meet me at the church at noon. Isolde's stomach tightened. She had spent the last few days trying to process everything. Her return, the message she was tasked with delivering, the strange dreams and visions that haunted her sleep. But this was something new. Father Dominic was being unusually cryptic. Was this man someone she could trust? She had no choice but to go. She didn't fully understand why she was chosen or what the next steps would be, but she knew she couldn't ignore the pull of destiny. When she arrived at the church, Father Dominic was already waiting at the back entrance. His face was a mixture of concern and hope. You came, he said, almost as if relieved. I trust you, Isolde replied, though doubt lingered in her heart. She followed him inside the church, the cold stone walls echoing her every footstep. They walked past the empty pews toward the small meeting room at the back. There a man sat waiting, his face hidden by shadows, but his eyes gleamed with an unsettling intensity. Father Dominic gestured for Isolde to sit. This is Father Elias, he introduced him. He's one of the foremost theologians in Rome. He's been studying prophecies, visions, and divine messages for years. Father Elias stood and bowed his head in greeting. His hair was graying at the temples, and his voice carried a weight of experience. Isolde, I've heard much about you, your story. Your message is something I've been preparing for. I believe the time has come. Isolde frowned, confused. Preparing for what? Father Elias smiled faintly. There are many like you, Isolde, people who have received divine messages throughout history. You are not alone. In fact, there's a group of us, visionaries as we call ourselves. We have been watching and waiting for signs like yours. We believe that your return is part of a much larger picture. She leaned forward, her heart racing. What picture? What do you mean? Father Elias exchanged a look with Father Dominic before speaking again. I'll be blunt with you, Isolde. The world is on the brink of great change. There have been signs throughout history, visions of darkness, of trials, of the faithful being tested. Your message is not just for this town, or even for this country. It's global. You must prepare the world for what's to come. Isolde felt a cold shiver run down her spine. What's to come? Father Elias stood up and walked to a small desk, where a worn leather-bound book lay. He opened it, revealing pages filled with delicate handwriting and strange symbols. The prophecies speak of a time when the world will be tested, a time when the faithful must rise, and those who have turned away from the light will face judgment. We believe that you are the messenger who will bring the world to its knees or to its salvation. Isolde looked at the book, then back at Father Dominic. I don't know if I'm ready for this. I don't even understand everything I've seen. How can I bear the weight of such a task? Father Dominic stepped forward, placing a hand on her shoulder. You're not alone, Isolde. We are here to help you, to guide you, but you must trust in the message you've received. You have been chosen, and now it's time to share it. Isolde swallowed hard, her throat dry. She had always felt that something extraordinary awaited her, but this was far beyond anything she had imagined. Her entire life had been leading up to this moment. Father Elias spoke again, his voice softer now. There will be those who will try to discredit you, those who will mock your claims, but there will also be those who believe. It is they who will help you spread the word. Isolde took a deep breath, her mind racing. The burden of the message felt heavier than ever before, but there was something else too, a sense of peace, a knowledge that no matter what happened, this was her calling, and she would not run from it. Isolde looked down at the worn pages of the book Father Elias had shown her. There was so much she didn't understand, but what was clear was that the world was in turmoil, and only faith could lead them through it. As she pondered, she realized how important it was to share her story with others. It wasn't just about her. This was a message for the world. If you believe that the light is stronger than the darkness, share this journey with others. Like, comment, and subscribe, because now more than ever, we need to stand united. The rest of the meeting passed in quiet reflection, with Father Elias explaining the history of divine messengers and the burden they carried. He spoke of great figures from the past, saints, mystics, and visionaries who had received divine revelations and had changed the course of history. Isolde left the church that day with a new sense of purpose. She was no longer just a survivor of a miraculous event. She was the bearer of a message that could save the world. The road ahead was uncertain, fraught with challenges and doubts, but one thing was certain: she could not turn back now. The days after Isolde's meeting with Father Dominic and Father Elias were a blur of whispers and rumors. The town buzzed with curiosity. Her miraculous return from the dead was no longer just a local story. It had spread beyond the borders of her small Catholic community, and the media had begun to take notice. Some saw her as a divine messenger, others as a fraud. Isolde found herself at the center of a spiritual storm she wasn't prepared for. Her parents tried to keep her grounded, wrapping her in the comfort of family life. Sophia, still deeply shaken by the events, spent hours on her knees praying, her rosary never far from her hand. Raphael, however, had become distant, his skepticism hardening into doubt. He wasn't sure if he believed in divine miracles or in the message his daughter claimed to have received. But what troubled him most was the danger he felt lurked in her newfound purpose. "Isolde, listen to me," Raphael said one evening, his voice low and strained. "You're not a prophet. You're my daughter. You don't need to carry this burden." She sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. Her thoughts were miles away, her mind filled with visions, disturbing, cryptic images she couldn't shake. "Papa, I don't know how to explain it. I didn't ask for this. But he called me back. I have to share his message." "His message?" Raphael scoffed, his face darkening. "Isolde, what you're saying sounds extreme. People will laugh at you, ridicule you. Do you really want that? You don't even fully understand it yourself." Isolde's gaze met his unwavering. "I understand enough to know that something is coming. Something terrible. I saw it." Her father's expression faltered, the sharpness in his eyes softening with the weight of her words. But then, a knock at the door interrupted the moment. It was a man from the local news station, a reporter by the name of John Graves, accompanied by a camera crew. The news of Isolde's miraculous revival had reached their office, and they were eager to interview her. They promised to keep the tone respectful, focusing on her story, but Isolde could sense the hidden agenda beneath their polite smiles. They wanted spectacle, controversy, and ratings. Her heart skipped a beat. Was she ready for this? Father Dominic had warned her that the media would be among her greatest challenges. Some would try to twist her words, others would call her a charlatan. But it was a necessary evil, a way to spread her message. Isolde reluctantly agreed to the interview, though she could feel her stomach tighten with nerves. The camera's glare seemed brighter than the sun itself as they set up in the living room. Sophia excused herself, her face pale with worry, but Isolde knew she had to face this head on. The moment the camera turned on, John Graves smiled warmly, his voice smooth and practiced. "Thank you for agreeing to speak with us, Isolde. We're all fascinated by your story, your miraculous return from the dead. But some are asking, is it really a miracle, or is there a more logical explanation? What happened that day?" Isolde took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly. She glanced at her father, who was standing in the corner of the room, arms crossed and watching with a frown. Then she turned back to the camera and spoke from her heart. "I can't explain it. I died. I was gone. But then I woke up. I was with him, with Jesus. He told me that I was sent back to deliver a message, that the world is heading towards darkness, and we need to turn back to him before it's too late." The words felt heavy as they left her lips. She couldn't shake the sense that every eye in the room was scrutinizing her every move. John Graves leaned forward, his smile never faltering. "That's quite a statement, Isolde. Some might say that's the kind of thing you'd expect from a cult leader or someone trying to start a movement. What makes you so sure that what you experienced was a divine message and not something imagined?" Her breath caught in her throat. The question was sharp, an attack disguised as curiosity. Her mind raced for a response, but deep down, she knew she couldn't force anyone to believe her. She couldn't even fully explain it herself. "I know what I saw," she said quietly, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. "It wasn't a dream, it was real. He spoke to me, and I was shown things that I can't ignore. There's a darkness coming, a reckoning, and I was sent back to warn people, to wake them up." The room fell into an uneasy silence. John Graves didn't immediately respond. He looked at her with a mix of curiosity and doubt, then nodded. "Thank you, Isolde. We'll be in touch. But you understand, of course, that not everyone will believe your story. Many will think this is just a cry for attention." "I know," Isolde replied softly, "but I have to speak the truth even if no one believes me." As Isolde finished the interview and the camera crew left, she felt a weight settle on her shoulders. Doubt, skepticism, and judgment would follow her wherever she went, but she couldn't afford to turn away now. Too many people needed to hear the truth. She had been given a divine mission, and she wouldn't let fear stop her from completing it. The following weeks were a whirlwind. The interview had made Isolde a local sensation, but not all attention was positive. Online forums buzzed with arguments over her authenticity. Some people believed her, inspired by her calm demeanor and unwavering conviction. Others accused her of seeking fame and exploiting tragedy. And some, more dangerous still, mocked her as a fraud, questioning everything from her death to her claim of a divine encounter. Isolde's mother stayed close, praying for strength, but her father remained distant, growing more and more skeptical with each passing day. Isolde knew he loved her, but the burden of her message was tearing their family apart. Then, one night, as she sat in her room, she saw something in her dreams, visions that were becoming more vivid and more terrifying. In the dream, she was standing in the middle of a vast, darkened city. Shadows loomed overhead, and the air was thick with smoke. People were running in all directions, panicked, their faces twisted in fear. In the distance, she saw a figure, cloaked in light, standing in the center of the chaos. It was Jesus, his face serene but filled with sorrow. He raised his hand, and a voice, both thunderous and gentle, echoed in her mind. "Prepare. The time is near." Isolde awoke, her heart pounding. It was no longer a question of if something was coming. It was coming, and it was closer than she had ever imagined. Isolde's world had shifted once again, and this time, there was no turning back. The dream she had experienced, the vision of the darkened city, the chaos, and the figure of Jesus, both sorrowful and commanding, had left an indelible mark on her soul. She couldn't shake the feeling that the time had come, that the message she had been given was not just a warning, but a call to action. She was more certain than ever that the darkness Jesus had spoken of was not a metaphor. It was real, and it was coming for the world. Isolde spent the next few days in silence, retreating to her room to meditate and pray. The weight of her mission pressed heavily on her chest. She had no idea where to begin, how to spread the message that had been entrusted to her. She couldn't go on social media and broadcast her thoughts, not when the world was so divided. She had to find a way to reach the hearts of those who needed to hear the truth, to save them from the impending chaos. Then, in the midst of her struggle, she remembered the small church at the edge of town. It was a humble place, built on the foundations of faith, but it had always been a sanctuary for the weary and the lost. She had attended Mass there as a child, her grandmother lighting candles for the saints, and the priest, Father Mateo, was a kind and gentle man, deeply devoted to the Lord. Maybe he could help her find a way forward. The following Sunday, Isolde made her way to the church, her heart pounding with the realization that her path was beginning to take shape. She walked through the creaky wooden doors and took a seat near the back, watching the congregation file in. The old pews creaked under the weight of the faithful, and the scent of incense filled the air. Father Mateo, a man in his late 60s with graying hair and a gentle smile, stood at the altar. His voice, though soft, carried the authority of years of service to God. He began the Mass, his words resonating with the stillness of the room. But today, Isolde was not here as a passive observer. She had a purpose. After the service, Father Mateo greeted the parishioners as they left. When he saw Isolde, he paused, his eyes softening with recognition. He had heard about her miraculous revival, but he had kept his distance, respecting her need for space. "Isolde," he said warmly, stepping closer. "It's good to see you here. How are you feeling?" "I'm struggling," she admitted, her voice low. "Father Mateo, I need your help. I don't know how to begin, but I know I have a message to share, a message I can't ignore." Father Mateo studied her with a knowing look. "I've heard your story, Isolde, and I believe you. But the question is, how do we help others hear the message you've received? How do we prepare them?" Isolde's eyes brightened. "I don't know yet, but I feel like we need to start with something simple. A gathering, a place where people can come, listen, and pray. I need to speak to them. They need to hear what I have to say, and I can't do it alone." Father Mateo nodded, his expression solemn. "You're not alone, Isolde. I've always believed that God moves in mysterious ways. If you truly feel called to share this message, I will help you." Isolde's heart soared with relief. She had feared that others would dismiss her, but Father Mateo's support gave her the strength she needed to move forward. Together, they set a date for a special gathering at the church. They spread the word quietly, through whispers and personal invitations, knowing that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be skeptics, and even those who mocked her, but they also hoped there would be hearts ready to listen. The night before the gathering, Isolde sat in the church, bathed in the soft glow of the candles that flickered around the altar. She prayed with every ounce of her being, asking God for the strength to face the unknown. She knew she had to deliver this message, no matter how difficult it might be. She had to trust that the right people would come, the ones who needed to hear it most. Here's Chapter 5 in full detail, The Messenger of the Light, Chapter 5. The call to action. Isolde's world had shifted once again, and this time, there was no turning back. The dream she had experienced, the vision of the darkened city, the chaos, and the figure of Jesus, both sorrowful and commanding, had left an indelible mark on her soul. She couldn't shake the feeling that the time had come, that the message she had been given was not just a warning, but a call to action. She was more certain than ever that the darkness Jesus had spoken of was not a metaphor. It was real, and it was coming for the world. Isolde spent the next few days in silence, retreating to her room to meditate and pray. The weight of her mission pressed heavily on her chest. She had no idea where to begin, how to spread the message that had been entrusted to her. She couldn't go on social media and broadcast her thoughts, not when the world was so divided. She had to find a way to reach the hearts of those who needed to hear the truth, to save them from the impending chaos. Then, in the midst of her struggle, she remembered the small church at the edge of town. It was a humble place, built on the foundations of faith, but it had always been a sanctuary for the weary and the lost. She had attended Mass there as a child, her grandmother lighting candles for the saints, and the priest, Father Mateo, was a kind and gentle man, deeply devoted to the Lord. Maybe he could help her find a way forward. The following Sunday, Isolde made her way to the church, her heart pounding with the realization that her path was beginning to take shape. She walked through the creaky wooden doors and took a seat near the back, watching the congregation file in. The old pews creaked under the weight of the faithful, and the scent of incense filled the air. Father Mateo, a man in his late 60s with graying hair and a gentle smile, stood at the altar. His voice, though soft, carried the authority of years of service to God. He began the Mass, his words resonating with the stillness of the room. But today, Isolde was not here as a passive observer. She had a purpose. After the service, Father Matteo greeted the parishioners as they left. When he saw Isolde, he paused, his eyes softening with recognition. He had heard about her miraculous revival, but he had kept his distance, respecting her need for space. "Isolde," he said warmly, stepping closer. "It's good to see you here. How are you feeling?" "I'm struggling," she admitted, her voice low. "Father Matteo, I need your help. I don't know how to begin, but I know I have a message to share, a message I can't ignore." Father Matteo studied her with a knowing look. "I've heard your story, Isolde, and I believe you. But the question is, how do we help others hear the message you've received? How do we prepare them?" Isolde's eyes brightened. "I don't know yet, but I feel like we need to start with something simple, a gathering, a place where people can come, listen, and pray. I need to speak to them. They need to hear what I have to say, and I can't do it alone." Father Matteo nodded, his expression solemn. "You're not alone, Isolde. I've always believed that God moves in mysterious ways. If you truly feel called to share this message, I will help you." Isolde's heart soared with relief. She had feared that others would dismiss her, but Father Matteo's support gave her the strength she needed to move forward. Together, they set a date for a special gathering at the church. They spread the word quietly, through whispers and personal invitations, knowing that the road ahead would not be easy. There would be skeptics, and even those who mocked her, but they also hoped there would be hearts ready to listen. The night before the gathering, Isolde sat in the church, bathed in the soft glow of the candles that flickered around the altar. She prayed with every ounce of her being, asking God for the strength to face the unknown. She knew she had to deliver this message, no matter how difficult it might be. She had to trust that the right people would come, the ones who needed to hear it most. Mid-chapter call to action, subtle integration. Isolde knew this gathering could change everything. It was more than just a chance for her to speak. It was an opportunity to spread the light that had been entrusted to her, to share the hope that was so desperately needed in these uncertain times. If you've been moved by her journey, share your thoughts. Like, comment, and subscribe. The world needs to hear this message, and together we can help it reach the hearts of those who need it. The night of the gathering arrived, and the church was filled with a mix of eager faces and skeptical ones. Isolde stood at the front, her hands trembling but her heart steady. Father Matteo stood beside her, offering silent support. The air in the room was thick with anticipation, and the low hum of whispered conversations made it clear that many had come out of curiosity, unsure of what to expect. When the time came, Isolde stepped forward to the podium, her gaze sweeping across the room. For a moment she felt small, vulnerable, but she quickly reminded herself of the purpose that brought her here. She wasn't speaking for herself, she was speaking for him, for the message he had given her. "Thank you for coming tonight," she began, her voice soft at first but growing stronger with each word. "I know many of you are here out of curiosity, and I understand. I have come to speak to you about something I cannot ignore, a message that was given to me, something that I've seen with my own eyes." She paused, letting her words settle. The room was silent now, all eyes on her. "I was sent back from death," she continued. "I have seen the darkness that is coming. But more than that, I was given hope. I was given the knowledge that there is still time to turn things around. But we must act now." There was a quiet murmur in the room. Some faces were filled with doubt, while others seemed to lean forward, captivated by her words. "The time is near," Isolde said, her voice trembling with the weight of her message. "We must turn back to him. We must prepare ourselves, and we must help those around us to see the truth before it's too late." As she finished, the room remained still. No one spoke. Isolde's heart pounded in her chest. She couldn't see the future, she didn't know what would happen next. But she had spoken the truth, and now all she could do was wait. Isolde woke early the next morning, the weight of the previous night's gathering still lingering on her heart. The church had been filled with a mixture of emotions, hope, fear, skepticism, and something deeper, something more profound. But despite the uncertain reception of her message, Isolde knew she had done the right thing. She had spoken the truth, and now it was out of her hands. The seeds had been planted, but as the days passed, doubt began to creep in. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was happening, something beyond her comprehension. She had been expecting resistance, but now she feared there was something more, something darker. It started with small signs. A phone call from an unknown number in the middle of the night, disturbing, cryptic messages that were hard to decipher. Whispers in the streets. People who had once greeted her with open arms now avoided her gaze. She felt the isolation tightening around her like a noose, And then, one afternoon, as she walked through the town square, it happened. The weather had been unseasonably warm for winter, the sun shining down with an almost unnatural brilliance. Isolde paused at the fountain in the center of the square, her thoughts far away, when she noticed a crowd gathering nearby. At first, she thought it was just the usual bustle of the market, but something was different, an energy in the air, something unsettling. Curiosity piqued, she walked closer. The crowd had gathered around the church's old bell tower, where a series of strange glowing symbols had appeared on the tower's stone face. They were unlike anything Isolde had ever seen, bright, almost ethereal, pulsating with an unnatural light. The symbols seemed to shift and change, flickering in and out of existence. Isolde's heart skipped a beat. These symbols were no ordinary markings. She had seen them before, in her visions, in the dreams that had become more frequent in the past few weeks. This was the sign she had been waiting for, the first true manifestation of the darkness she had warned about. As the crowd murmured in awe and fear, Isolde approached the tower. Her heart raced, her breath shallow. She could feel the pull of the symbols, an almost magnetic force drawing her closer to them. But before she could reach out, a voice stopped her. "Isolde, wait!" It was Father Dominic, hurrying toward her through the crowd. His face was pale, his expression grave. "You can't get too close," he said, his voice filled with urgency. "These symbols, they're not of this world. They are a warning." Isolde's mind raced. A warning from who? Father Dominic's eyes were wide with fear. "The forces you're dealing with are much stronger than you realize. The time has come for the world to choose, Isolde. You must be careful. This is the first sign." Isolde stood frozen, her gaze fixed on the glowing symbols. She could hear whispers from the crowd, some people praying, others cursing. The tension in the air was palpable, the fear spreading like wildfire. "Father," Isolde said, her voice shaking, "what do we do now? What does this mean?" Father Dominic didn't answer immediately. He simply took her arm and led her away from the tower, his grip firm and insistent. As they moved through the crowd, he spoke in a low voice. "This is only the beginning, Isolde. What we're facing is beyond anything we've ever known. You are right to warn them, but you must be prepared. This is only a small part of a much larger force that is moving against us. We need to prepare." Isolde's mind was reeling. The vision had become reality. The signs were coming faster now, and she had no idea how to stop them. All she knew was that she couldn't do this alone. "Father, I can't do this alone," she whispered, the weight of her mission pressing heavily on her shoulders. Father Dominic paused and turned to face her, his eyes filled with determination. "You're not alone, Isolde. We will stand together in this, and so will others. The message you carry is too important to be ignored, but you must be strong. We need more than just faith, we need action. You must gather those who believe in this cause, those who can help you." Isolde knew the road ahead would be fraught with dangers and challenges, but she couldn't turn back now. The world was waiting for the truth, and it was up to her to deliver it. If you believe that the time has come to face the darkness and spread the light, share this journey. Like, comment, and subscribe. Together we can face what lies ahead. That evening, Isolde couldn't sleep. Her mind was consumed by the vision of the symbols on the tower, by the fear in Father Dominic's eyes. What did it all mean, and what was she supposed to do now? As she sat by her window, staring out into the night, the door to her room creaked open. It was Sophia, her mother's worried face peeking through the door. "Isolde, I know something is happening," Sophia said, her voice trembling. "I can feel it. The world is changing. I've been praying for you, for all of us. But I'm afraid, Isolde. I'm afraid of what's coming." Isolde walked over to her mother, wrapping her arms around her in a tight embrace. "I'm scared too, Mama. But we can't stop. We have to prepare to fight against this darkness together." Sophia nodded, her eyes filled with tears. "But how, Isolde? How do we fight what we don't even understand?" Isolde pulled back slightly, looking into her mother's eyes. "I don't know yet, Mama, but I'll find a way, I promise." In the days that followed, Isolde began gathering those who had attended her gathering at the church. It was a small group at first, those who had believed her message, those who had seen the signs and felt the same unease in their hearts. Together they began planning, praying, and preparing, but Isolde knew that this was just the beginning. There was so much more to do, and the challenges would only grow. The darkness was closing in, but so was the light. The days after the first sign were filled with uncertainty. The glowing symbols on the tower had vanished as mysteriously as they had appeared, but the tension in the air remained thick, heavy with the promise of something impending. Isolde's group had grown, the small gathering of believers now a collective united by a common cause. to stand against the darkness, whatever it might be, and to carry the message of light and salvation. Isolde spent hours in prayer and meditation, seeking guidance from God. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jesus, his face filled with both sorrow and compassion. He had called her back from the brink of death for a reason, she knew that much. But what was the true meaning of her mission? What was the role she was meant to play in the salvation of the world? One night, as the sun set and the sky turned to hues of orange and purple, Isolde found herself walking alone to the church. She needed to be in his presence, to feel his guidance. The church had become her sanctuary, a place where she could escape the confusion of the world and find clarity in the silence of prayer. She entered the church, her footsteps echoing on the cold stone floors. The air was thick with the scent of incense, and the flickering candlelight cast long shadows on the walls. She knelt before the altar, her heart heavy with the weight of her calling. Her fingers clasped the rosary that hung around her neck, and she closed her eyes, offering a silent prayer. "Lord," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "I do not understand what is happening. I do not understand the signs you have shown me, but I trust in you. I trust in your plan. Show me the way." The room fell into silence, the stillness wrapping around her like a warm embrace. For a long moment there was nothing but the sound of her own breath, the soft flicker of the candles, and the rhythmic beat of her heart. And then, suddenly, she felt it, a presence, a warmth that enveloped her, a sense of peace that calmed her racing thoughts. And then she heard it. "Isolde." Her breath caught in her throat. She knew that voice. It was familiar, yet beyond anything she could have ever imagined. The voice of Jesus. "Isolde," he repeated, his tone filled with both comfort and authority. "Do not fear. I am with you, always." Tears welled up in her eyes as she felt his presence, felt his love, radiating through her like a flood. She fell to her knees, her hands trembling as she whispered, "Lord, I don't know what to do. I am not worthy of this. Why me?" "You are worthy, Isolde," he answered, his voice gentle but filled with unwavering conviction. "You have been chosen to deliver a message of love, of redemption, of hope. The world has turned away from me, and the time is coming when they will need to turn back. But there is still time. You must prepare them, my child." Isolde felt as though her heart would burst with the intensity of the love and responsibility that flowed through her. The weight of her mission had never been so clear. She had been chosen to warn the world of the darkness that was coming, to share the message of salvation that only Jesus could provide. But how could she, one young girl, accomplish such a task? "Lord, how?" she asked, her voice trembling. "How can I reach them? How can I make them believe?" Jesus' voice was filled with tenderness as he spoke. "You will not do this alone. I will walk with you, as I walked with my disciples. The faithful will come. They will gather to listen, to learn, and to spread the truth. The light will shine, and the darkness will not overcome it." His words were a balm to her soul, but also a call to action. She could not sit idly by while the world spiraled into chaos. She had been given a mission, a divine commission, and it was time to act. "I will go, Lord," she said, her voice steady now, filled with the resolve that had been lacking before. "I will go and spread your message. I will warn them." "You will not be alone," Jesus assured her. "Trust in me and trust in those who will join you. Together, you will be a beacon of light in the darkness. But you must remember, my child, that the battle will be fierce. Not all will accept the truth you bring. Some will fight you, mock you, and try to silence you. But you must remain steadfast, for the victory is already won in me." Isolde felt the weight of his words settle deep in her heart. The road ahead would not be easy. There would be resistance, persecution, and perhaps even death. But she was not afraid. With Jesus by her side, she could face whatever came. She could endure whatever trials the world would throw at her. "I will trust in you," she whispered, her heart full of faith. "I will not falter." A soft, radiant light filled the church, and Isolde knew that he was with her. His presence surrounded her, filling her with peace and strength. She had been called, and now she would answer. The world was waiting for the truth, and it was up to Isolde, and all who believed in the light, to deliver it. The next day, Isolde gathered the group of believers once more. There was no time to waste. The signs were coming faster now, and she could feel the urgency of her mission. As the small group assembled in the church, Isolde stood before them, her heart full of the strength and conviction she had gained from her encounter with Jesus. "I have seen the Lord," she said, her voice strong and clear, "and he has shown me the path. He has given me a message to share with the world, a message of love, of redemption, of salvation. But we must act now. The darkness is closing in, and we cannot wait any longer." The group listened in stunned silence, each person feeling the weight of her words. The time had come, and Isolde was ready. She could feel Jesus with her, guiding her every step of the way. The days after Isolde's encounter with Jesus were unlike any she had ever experienced. Her faith, once fragile, now burned like a steady flame within her soul. She felt his presence guiding her at every moment, a constant, comforting reassurance that she was not alone. Her mission was clear, and nothing would sway her from it. The group of believers that had gathered around her in the church was growing as word of her message spread throughout the town. Some came in awe, some in fear, but all came seeking the truth. They listened as Isolde spoke of the signs and the vision she had received, of the warning from Jesus that the time was near. They listened intently, and many of them believed. One evening, Father Matteo joined her in the church after Mass. He had been a quiet, observant presence in the group, offering guidance when needed, but he had not yet fully shared his thoughts on what was unfolding. As Isolde sat in the candlelit pew, praying for strength, he approached her with a gentle smile. "Isolde," he said softly, sitting beside her, "your faith is extraordinary. I see the light in you, a light that is undeniable, but you must be prepared for the challenges ahead. This is not a simple journey. What you are facing is not just about saving souls, it is about standing firm in the face of opposition, even hatred." Isolde looked at him, her eyes filled with determination. "I know, Father, but Jesus has shown me the way. I am not afraid of what comes. The darkness is real, but the light is stronger. It will not overcome us." Father Matteo nodded slowly, his eyes filled with both admiration and concern. "You are right, Isolde. The light is stronger. But there are forces in this world, spiritual forces that will try to stop you, to stop this message from reaching the people who need it most. You must be prepared to fight, not with swords, but with faith." Isolde's heart swelled as she thought about his words. She was not afraid, for she knew that the battle she was about to face was a spiritual one that only those who had true faith could win. The next day, Isolde gathered the group once more. They were meeting in the church after sunset, the soft glow of the candles casting flickering shadows on the walls. The atmosphere was thick with anticipation, and the small congregation of believers could feel the heaviness of the moment. They knew they were standing on the precipice of something extraordinary. "Brothers and sisters," Isolde began, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "I have been shown the path. Jesus has called me to deliver a message of salvation to the world, but we cannot do this alone. We must come together in unity, in faith, for the road ahead will be difficult." She paused, her gaze sweeping over the faces before her. "The darkness is real, and it will not go quietly, but we are not powerless. Jesus has already won the battle. We are his army, and we must stand firm in his light." A murmur rippled through the group. Some faces were filled with doubt, others with determination, but they all shared one thing in common. They were willing to follow Isolde, to listen to her message, and to fight for the light. "The Lord has given us the tools we need to fight," Isolde continued, her voice growing stronger. "Through prayer, through faith, through love. These are the weapons that will carry us through the darkness. But we must not grow complacent. We must prepare for what is to come." Father Matteo stepped forward, his hands clasped in prayer. "Isolde is right. The time has come for us to rise up, to pray, to speak the truth, to spread the message of salvation. The world is in turmoil, and we are the light that will guide them back to the path of righteousness." The group stood in unison, their hearts filled with the power of their collective faith. Isolde could feel the strength of the believers around her. Together they were an army, a divine army, prepared to face the darkness with the light of Jesus as their guide. As the days passed, Isolde's group began to grow in strength. More people came to the church, drawn by the message she carried, by the undeniable truth that flowed from her words. They gathered in prayer, in worship, and in preparation for the battle that loomed ahead. Isolde began to train the believers, teaching them how to pray with power, how to fight the spiritual battle with the weapons of faith and love. She spoke of the armor of God, the belt of truth, the breastplate of righteousness, the shield of faith, the helmet of salvation, and the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God. "Each one of you has a role to play," she said one evening as they gathered in the church. "We are all called to stand firm, to put on the full armor of God and fight for the salvation of those around us. The battle may seem impossible, but with Jesus by our side, we are unstoppable." The believers began to take her words to heart. They prayed more fervently, they spoke the word of God with greater conviction, and they prepared for whatever the darkness would bring. And in the stillness of the night, when Isolde knelt alone in the church, she could feel the power of their collective prayers rising to the heavens, filling the space with a divine presence. The battle was not just Isolde's, it was a fight for all of humanity, And as more believers gathered to prepare for the spiritual battle ahead, they knew that the light would prevail. If you believe that faith and prayer can change the world, share this journey. Like, comment, and subscribe. Together, we can stand against the darkness and bring the world back to the light. One night, as Isolde prayed before the altar, she felt the presence of Jesus again. He was there, in the stillness, his light surrounding her like a blanket. "My child," he said, his voice soft but filled with power, "you are not alone in this. I will always be with you. I have sent my angels to guard you, to guide you. You will face challenges, but you will never be forsaken. The path you walk is the path of salvation, and you walk it with me." Isolde's heart filled with a peace she had never known. She was not just a messenger, she was a warrior, armed with the love and power of Jesus Christ. She was not alone. The army of the faithful stood with her, and the angels of the Lord walked beside her. The darkness might be coming, but they would be ready. They would stand together, united in faith, and they would fight with everything they had. As Isolde's group continued to grow, so too did the weight of the responsibility she carried. Her days were filled with prayers, teachings, and preparations. The believers who had gathered in the church were united by a common cause, standing against the darkness that was encroaching upon the world. And with every passing day, Isolde felt the divine strength of Jesus filling her, guiding her, and fortifying her resolve. But the peace she felt would not last forever. The night was heavy with a sense of foreboding as Isolde stood before the altar, her hands clasped in prayer. The church was eerily silent, and the soft flickering of the candles cast long, dancing shadows on the walls. She had come to seek clarity, to find the strength to lead her people through the trials that lay ahead. And then it happened. An overwhelming sense of unease swept over her, as though the very air had thickened. Isolde felt a chill creep down her spine, a dark presence making itself known. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end as she closed her eyes and whispered a prayer for protection. "Lord, protect us," she said softly, her voice trembling. "Guide me, for the darkness is closing in." Suddenly, a soft sound interrupted her prayer, a creak of the door behind her. She turned, her heart racing, and saw a figure standing in the doorway. It was Father Mateo, his face pale, his expression troubled. "Isolde," he said, his voice filled with urgency. "There is something you need to know." Isolde's heart sank. She had come to trust Father Mateo, to rely on him as a source of strength and wisdom. But something in his voice told her that what he was about to say would change everything. "What is it, Father?" she asked, her voice steady despite the rising fear in her chest. "There are forces working against you, forces within the very group you have gathered. Not all are as they seem," Father Mateo said, stepping closer. "I have seen the signs. Someone is planning to betray you." Isolde's breath caught in her throat. Betrayal. The word echoed in her mind, and the weight of it felt like a heavy stone pressing against her chest. She had suspected that there would be opposition. There always was, after all. But she had never imagined that it would come from within her own circle. "Who?" she demanded, her voice sharp with alarm. "Who would betray me?" Father Mateo hesitated, his eyes clouded with uncertainty. "I don't know yet, Isolde. But there are whispers. There are those who do not believe in the message you carry. And there are those who fear the power you wield. They will stop at nothing to see you fail." Isolde stood motionless, her mind racing. She had known that the road ahead would not be easy, that the darkness would fight back with everything it had. But to be betrayed by someone she trusted, it was a blow she hadn't prepared for. "We cannot allow this to happen," she said, her voice firm. "We must protect the message. We must stand united." Father Mateo nodded, but his face was clouded with concern. "Be cautious, Isolde. Not all who follow you are true believers, and the darkness is crafty. It will use fear, doubt, and greed to manipulate those closest to you." Isolde's mission was more important than ever. The darkness was closing in, and she needed the strength of the faithful to stand strong. That night, Isolde could not sleep. The sense of dread weighed heavily on her, and the feeling of betrayal gnawed at her soul. She had to find out who was behind the whispers, who would turn against her and her mission. But her thoughts were interrupted when a familiar figure entered her room. It was Sophia, her mother, her face pale and drawn with worry. "Isolde," Sophia whispered, her voice shaking. "I don't know how to say this, but something is happening. I've heard rumors, dark rumors. There are those who are saying that you are leading people astray, that you're bringing evil upon this town." Isolde's heart clenched in her chest. She had suspected that the forces of darkness were working to undermine her mission. But to have her own mother come to her with such news, it was a blow she had not been prepared for. "Mama, I know," Isolde said softly, taking Sophia's hands in hers. "I felt it too. There are those who are trying to stop this, to stop me, but I cannot turn back. The Lord has called me to this, and I will not be deterred." Sophia's eyes filled with tears, and she pulled Isolde into a tight embrace. "I am scared for you, my daughter. I don't want to lose you." Isolde held her mother close, the weight of the situation pressing down on her. "I will not be lost, Mama. Not as long as I have faith. I will not let the darkness take what has been given to us. We have a purpose. Together, we will fight." The following days were filled with increasing tension. The betrayal that Isolde had feared seemed imminent, and whispers of discontent grew louder. The group of believers was divided. Some had begun to question Isolde's message, unsure of the signs and the teachings she had shared. Others had become fearful of the coming darkness and sought to distance themselves from her. It was during one such meeting that Isolde's greatest fear came true. As she stood before the group, speaking of the need for unity, a man she had once trusted, Lucas, a fellow believer who had been a pillar of support in the early days, stepped forward. His face was grim, his eyes filled with cold resolve. "Isolde," Lucas said, his voice filled with accusation. "You speak of salvation, but what you bring is only fear and division. You claim to have seen the signs, but what you are leading us into is a path of destruction." The room fell silent. Isolde's heart pounded in her chest. She had known this moment would come, but the sting of betrayal still cut deeply. Lucas had once been her ally. How had it come to this? "You are wrong, Lucas," she said softly, her voice filled with sorrow. "I am not here to bring fear. I am here to bring light, to save those who are lost. But if you choose to turn away, I cannot stop you." Lucas's eyes hardened. "Then it is with great sorrow that I must say your mission ends here. You have led us astray. We will no longer follow you." And with that, Lucas turned, walking out of the church, taking with him a group of followers who had begun to question Isolde's purpose. Isolde stood alone in the center of the room, the weight of betrayal heavy in her heart. But even in this moment of despair, she felt the presence of Jesus beside her. The road ahead would be long, filled with trials and pain. But she would not falter. The light would always overcome the darkness. The days following Lucas's betrayal were filled with turmoil. Isolde spent countless hours in prayer, seeking guidance from Jesus. Every moment felt like a test of her faith, her resolve shaken by the departure of those who had once stood by her side. But with each prayer, she felt the strength of the Holy Spirit surging within her, a reminder that she was not alone in this fight. Father Matteo had become her rock, offering counsel and support during this difficult time. Though the church was divided, he assured Isolde that her mission was far from over. "The road to salvation is never easy, my child," he told her one evening. "Even Jesus faced betrayal. But remember, he carried the cross for all of us, and he has not forsaken you." Isolde felt the weight of his words deeply. She had known that the path ahead would be filled with challenges, but she had never expected to experience the sting of betrayal so personally. And yet, with each passing day, the fire within her heart grew stronger. She would not turn away from the calling she had received. She would continue to spread the light, no matter the cost. The group of believers who remained with her was smaller, but they were steadfast. Isolde knew that this was the true army, the ones who would follow her into the darkness, armed with the light of faith. They gathered in secret now, holding clandestine meetings to pray and share in the teachings she had received. But the forces of darkness were not idle. They too were working behind the scenes, sowing seeds of doubt and fear. Rumors spread through the town, painting Isolde as a false prophet, a woman leading others astray. Some even went so far as to accuse her of witchcraft, claiming that she had made a pact with the devil. Isolde knew that these lies were being spread by the enemy, but the weight of the accusations was still crushing. She could feel the eyes of the townspeople on her, whispering behind her back, judging her every move. It was a heavy burden to bear. One night, as Isolde knelt before the altar in prayer, she felt the familiar presence of Jesus once more. His voice, soft yet powerful, filled her heart with peace. "Isolde," he said, his words like a balm to her wounded spirit. "You are on the right path. Do not be disheartened. The world will turn against you, as it did against me, but you are never alone. Your faith will be your shield, and my love will be your strength." Tears welled up in Isolde's eyes as she listened to his words. She had never felt more certain of her purpose. No matter the obstacles, no matter the opposition, she would continue to walk the path that Jesus had set before her. She would carry his light into the world, even if it meant facing the darkness alone. The next morning, Isolde gathered the remaining believers in the church. The air was thick with tension, and the weight of the world seemed to press down on them all. They had come together for a final meeting before the next step in their mission. Isolde could feel the uncertainty in the room, the fear and doubt that clung to each of them like a shadow. "We are at a crossroads," Isolde said, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside her. The world will not accept us. The darkness will fight back with all its might. But we are the light. We are the children of God, and we will not be silenced. She looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each person who had come to stand with her. There was Maria, a young woman whose family had disowned her for following Isolde's teachings. There was Father Mateo, whose faith had never wavered. And there was also Sophia, Isolde's mother, who had found a renewed sense of purpose in her daughter's mission. We are the army of God, Isolde continued, and we will stand firm. We will face the darkness together, with faith in our hearts and love for one another. We are the light of the world, and no matter how hard the darkness pushes, we will not be extinguished. Her words were met with murmurs of agreement, and a sense of unity filled the room. Though they were outnumbered, though the world seemed to be against them, they knew that they had something far stronger than any earthly force, faith. That night, as they prayed together, Isolde felt a deep sense of peace wash over her. The battle ahead would be difficult, and she knew that there would be more challenges, more betrayals, and more struggles. But she also knew that Jesus was with her. His love was the strength that would carry her through. And so, as dawn broke the next morning, Isolde stood before her followers, ready to face whatever the world would throw at them. She would carry the message of salvation into the darkness, no matter the cost. For she knew that the cross was a symbol not of defeat, but of victory. She had taken up her cross, and she would carry it, with the strength of Christ, all the way to the end. The battle for the light is only beginning. Will Isolde and her followers stand firm in their faith, or will the darkness overcome them? If you believe that light will always overcome darkness, join this journey. Like, comment, and subscribe to continue supporting the message of salvation. Together, we can stand firm and bring the truth to the world. That evening, as Isolde walked alone to the church, she felt a strange stillness in the air. It was as if the world had momentarily paused, holding its breath. She had a strange sense that something was coming, something that would test everything she had learned, everything she had fought for. When she reached the church, she found the doors ajar. The air inside was thick with a sense of foreboding. She stepped inside, her heart racing, and found the altar bathed in an eerie, unnatural light. At the base of the altar was a figure, cloaked in shadows. Isolde's breath caught in her throat as the figure stepped into the light. It was Lucas. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth she had once seen in them. "Isolde," he said, his voice laced with contempt. "You don't understand. This path you've chosen, it leads only to ruin." Isolde felt a pang of sadness in her heart. She had once considered Lucas a friend, someone who shared her vision. But now, standing before her, he was an adversary, an instrument of the darkness she had come to fight. "You've betrayed us, Lucas," Isolde said, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling within her. "But I will not fight you with anger or hatred. I will pray for you, as I pray for all who are lost." Lucas's lips curled into a bitter smile. "It's too late for prayers, Isolde. You've chosen your side, and now you will face the consequences." And with that, he turned and vanished into the shadows, leaving Isolde standing alone, once again facing the battle that lay ahead. Isolde stood in the center of the church, the silence surrounding her as thick and heavy as the darkness that had overtaken her soul. The words Lucas had spoken lingered in the air, echoing in her mind. Too late for prayers. They felt like a haunting curse, a final condemnation. Yet, deep within her, she knew the truth. There was never a time when prayer was too late. There was never a time when the light could not pierce the shadows. The following days were fraught with uncertainty. The once vibrant church now stood as a place of refuge and yet a battlefield in its own right. The members who remained loyal to Isolde grew restless. Their faith was tested, and some whispered in fear, questioning if the cost of standing with her was too great. Isolde had long known the consequences of following Jesus, but now she felt it in her bones, the weight of the cross growing heavier with each passing day. The opposition was no longer just external, it was inside her heart, too. The doubts, the fears, the temptation to turn back, they all clawed at her from the inside. As the sun began to set on another uncertain day, Isolde walked alone to the small grove of trees just outside the town. The wind rustled through the branches, and the evening air was thick with the scent of pine. She needed solace. She needed clarity. She knelt on the ground and closed her eyes, lifting her hands to the sky. "Lord," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion, "I am lost. I am afraid. The darkness is so close, and the burden of this mission is too much for me. I need you now more than ever." There was a long silence, and for a moment, Isolde felt the weight of the world press down on her. Then, as if on cue, she heard a voice, soft, comforting, yet filled with authority. "My child, you are never alone." Isolde's eyes snapped open, and there, standing before her, was the figure of Jesus. His eyes were filled with compassion, his presence glowing with an otherworldly light. It was a vision, yes, but one so real, so vivid, that Isolde felt as though she could touch him. "Lord," she cried, falling to her knees, "I am so weak. I have failed. I have allowed fear to take hold of my heart." Jesus reached down, lifting her chin gently so their eyes met. "You have not failed, Isolde. You are human, and in your weakness I am made strong. Do not let fear cloud your vision. The enemy is within your heart, not in the world around you. You must confront the darkness within yourself before you can overcome it outside." Isolde trembled as the weight of his words settled in. "But I am so afraid of losing everything, of losing my way, my people. They are starting to doubt, they are turning away. How do I lead them if I am struggling myself?" Jesus smiled softly, his hand resting on her shoulder. "Faith is not the absence of doubt, but the courage to press forward despite it. You are my messenger, Isolde, and through you, others will come to see the truth. But you must first trust that I am with you, always. You are never alone, even when you feel lost." Tears streamed down Isolde's face as she looked up at Jesus, feeling a peace she had never known. In that moment, she realized that the battle was not just for the souls of others. It was for her own soul. The doubts, the fears, the sense of betrayal, it was all part of the process of purification. And through it all, Jesus was by her side, guiding her, loving her. "I trust you, Lord," she whispered, her heart swelling with devotion. "I will not falter. I will carry your message, no matter the cost." The next morning, Isolde gathered her followers, her heart renewed and her spirit strengthened. She stood before them, the weight of the mission clear in her eyes, but her voice steady and filled with the power of Jesus' words. "My friends," she began, her eyes sweeping across the room, meeting each person's gaze. "We are at a crossroads. The darkness grows stronger every day. People will turn against us. They will try to break us. But we stand together, and together we will triumph. For Jesus is with us, and with him we are unstoppable." Her words were met with murmurs of agreement, the believers' faces brightening with renewed hope. For the first time in days, Isolde felt the strength of her mission flow through her, the sense of purpose that had been her anchor. The journey ahead would be difficult, but she was no longer afraid. It was then that Father Matteo spoke up, his voice filled with concern. "Isolde," he said, "there is something you must know. I've received word that Lucas and others who have turned away from us are gathering. They are planning something dangerous. They seek to destroy what you've built." Isolde's heart sank. She had known that the darkness was closing in, but now the threat was more real than ever. Lucas was no longer just a betrayer. He had become an enemy, one who would stop at nothing to see her fall. "We cannot let fear control us," Isolde said, her voice resolute. "We will face them head on. With Jesus by our side, we cannot fail." The following days were filled with preparation. The believers gathered, readying themselves for what was to come. Isolde prayed with them, urging them to stay strong, to trust in the power of God. They would face whatever the enemy threw at them, armed with the light of Jesus. But as the final confrontation loomed, Isolde knew that the true test was not in the battle that was coming, it was in her own heart. Would she continue to trust in Jesus, even in the face of overwhelming darkness? As night fell on the eve of the battle, Isolde stood alone in the church once again, her hands raised in prayer. "Lord, give me the strength to face this trial," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I am ready, but I need you. I cannot do this without you." And once again, she felt his presence fill the room, a calm certainty in her soul. "You are my messenger, Isolde. You have the strength to carry the light. Trust in me." With that, Isolde felt the power of Jesus surge within her, filling her with a peace that could not be shaken. The night before the battle felt like an eternity. Isolde and her followers spent their final hours in prayer, seeking strength from the Lord. The air was thick with anticipation, and Isolde could feel the tension that hung over the group. Tomorrow would be the culmination of everything they had worked for, everything they had sacrificed. Isolde knew the time had come to confront the enemy head-on, to face Lucas and the darkness that he had become. It was not just a physical battle, it was a spiritual one. This was where she would prove her faith, where she would make the ultimate choice to follow Jesus no matter the cost. The moon hung high in the sky, casting a pale light over the battlefield. Isolde stood at the forefront of her group, her heart racing but her faith unwavering. Father Matteo stood beside her, his face resolute, while the others were positioned behind, ready to follow wherever she led. Lucas appeared, flanked by his followers, their faces filled with disdain. He had become a figure of authority to them, his words now poisoned with bitterness. "You still don't understand, do you?" Lucas shouted, his voice echoing across the field. "This fight was never about light and darkness. It's about power, and I will not let you stand in the way of what's mine." Isolde stepped forward, her eyes fixed on him. "Lucas," she said calmly, "it was never about power. It's about truth. You've chosen to follow lies, but I will not follow you into the darkness. I will follow Jesus, the true light." "You are weak," Lucas sneered. "You're just a pawn in his game, just like all the others. There is no salvation, no truth. There is only power, and I will take it all." With a wave of his hand, Lucas signaled for his followers to advance. The battle began, and the sounds of chaos filled the air. But through it all, Isolde stood firm, her faith anchoring her in the midst of the storm. As the battle raged on, Isolde felt the weight of the cross heavy on her heart. She could see her followers struggling, but they fought with the strength of the light. She knew they could win. But the real challenge would come in the final confrontation with Lucas. In the midst of the battle, Lucas charged toward Isolde, his eyes burning with fury. He raised his hand, preparing to strike, but before he could reach her, Isolde cried out in a voice filled with authority, "In the name of Jesus, I command you to stop." For a brief moment, time seemed to stand still. The air around them crackled with the power of Jesus' name. Lucas faltered, his expression changing from anger to confusion. He hesitated. And then, in that moment of hesitation, Isolde stepped forward and extended her hand, offering a final plea. "It doesn't have to end this way, Lucas. There is still time for you to turn back. Jesus can still save you. Please, don't let the darkness consume you." Lucas looked at her, his eyes filled with conflict. For a heartbeat, it seemed that he might relent. But then, with a final cry of rage, he turned away and fled into the shadows, taking his followers with him. Isolde stood there, her heart heavy with sorrow, but also filled with peace. The battle was over, and the light had triumphed once again. Though the fight had been fierce, it had been a victory, not just for her, but for all who believed in the power of Jesus' love. Isolde stood at the edge of the town, gazing out at the horizon. The battle had been won, but the war was far from over. She knew that there would always be darkness in the world, always forces that would seek to pull people away from the light. But she also knew that as long as she remained faithful to the truth of Jesus, she would never falter. The town had begun to heal. Many of those who had once turned away from Isolde were now returning, their hearts filled with repentance and a renewed commitment to the faith. They had witnessed the power of the light, and they understood that no darkness could ever overpower it. Father Matteo had remained by her side, offering guidance and support. Together, they continued to lead the community, spreading the message of salvation and hope. Isolde had become a beacon of faith, her story inspiring others to walk the path of light. And though her journey had been long and filled with hardship, Isolde knew that she had fulfilled the mission that Jesus had set before her. She had carried his message to the world, and she had done so with unwavering faith and love. One evening, as she knelt in prayer, she felt the presence of Jesus once more. His voice, soft and comforting, filled her heart. "Well done, my faithful servant," he said. "You have carried my light to the world, and now it will shine through you forever. Your work is not finished, for the harvest is plentiful. But remember this, you are never alone, and my love will always guide you." Tears filled Isolde's eyes as she whispered, "I will follow you, Lord, wherever you lead me." And with that, the light of Jesus filled her soul, shining brighter than ever before. No matter where her path would lead, she knew one thing for certain: she would never walk alone. Isolde's journey is a reminder that faith can conquer any trial, that the light of Jesus will always overcome the darkness. If you believe in the power of faith, and you're ready to walk this journey with her, like, comment, and subscribe. Together we can continue to spread the truth and share the light of Jesus with the world.